Hello and welcome to another edition of Football Express. I'm Stephen Looney and joining me in the studio today are Chris Morgan, Michael Gault and Mark McIntosh. You're all very welcome, gentlemen. As ever, a recap of recent results in the Sports Direct Premiership. Tuesday, August 19th, Bangor 1, Crusaders 3, Cliftonville 1, Larne 1, Coleraine 2, Dungannon Swifts 0, Glentoran 2, Glenavon 0, and Portadown 0, Ballymena Utd 2. Carrick's game against Linfield was postponed because Linfield are playing Shelbourne on Thursday night. Sports Direct Premiership fixtures this weekend: Friday, August 22nd, Larne against Portadown at Inver Park. Saturday, August 23rd, Ballymena Utd against Bangor, Crusaders versus Glentoran, Dungannon Swifts against Carrick Rangers, Glenavon versus Coleraine, and we finish the weekend Sunday, August 24th, with a cracker at Windsor Park, Linfield against Cliftonville. Now, we're up and running in the season, Chris, and we've already seen a very high-profile manager lose his job. I have it here. Shock news at Inver Park on Monday afternoon when news broke that Nathan Rooney had been sacked at Larne. Nathan was appointed manager when Tiernan Lynch left for Derry City last November, but was sidelined due to a lack of a pro licence. IFA enrolled him so he could take up his position at the end of the season. He got through 2 rounds of Europe and then he had to leave his position. He was Kenny Bruce's man, and the new owners at Larne, it seems, didn't fancy him. What's going on at Inver Park? And any idea who's next, Chris? Look into your crystal ball. Shock news, it has to be said.
First thing you'd say, it can't be football. To say it can't be based on football and results, because you would look at the start of the season, as you rightly say, two rounds of Europe. It's always going to be a tough ask to knock a team out that finish sort of 5th or whatever they were in the Portuguese league. So your first suggestion would be that it's not based on anything football-wise, and even at that, to have played 6 games would be very early to be making a decision, and the reality is he's had some level of success there. So there's something other than that. You know, your assumption there or suggestion that he's Kenny Bruce's man. Yes, Kenny's appointed him. Is that the reason to take him out? Who knows? But you'd certainly feel that there's something other than football. I would assume, because so far this season you would say that he's had a reasonable amount of success.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, Michael, bring in. You know, all eyes were on Nathan Rooney sort of this summer because we know what happened last year, but he didn't have his licence. Gary Haverin stepped up and they finished second. Larne, fair play to them. I was very interested to see how they would play in Europe. Larne, I thought Europe was very, very important to them, not least of all financially. Nathan Rooney brought 3 players in, all on free transfers, no money spent at all. So I kind of got the impression that the purse strings were being tightened. Now, I think that there have been some disagreements between the manager and the new owners. Is it not maybe fair of new owners to come in and say, well, we want our people in? Because I have to echo what Chris says, getting through 2 rounds of Europe, and that was massive for Larne, financially as much as anything.
Yeah, as Chris said there, he's had a good start to the season. Obviously, I was speaking with Alan Manis a couple of days ago, and he said he was a brilliant coach, and it seemed like all the players got on well with him, and that reflected in performances. So obviously, it's maybe not just a footballing decision. It's come down to goodness knows what, and it's going to be difficult in this stage of the season to go and replace him. And you've heard names linked with whoever's going to be, but again, these new investors in might have someone in their head who they want to have, or have someone earmarked. And I think obviously Nathan came in under Kenny, and Kenny being away now, it's sort of these new owners they run the show, and they might want to have some sort of person in place to carry the team forward. And I'm not too sure, but as Chris said there, I don't think it's mainly a football decision. It's going to come down to the finances, getting the old man in, whatever it is. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
I mean, their bread and butter is performances in the league, and you'd look at it, and pre-season allows any new manager to come in and set a style of play, and I know the takeover in terms of Kenny going, the new guys coming in, wouldn't have allowed that to happen before a season starts or before pre-season, but that's an opportunity to plan, to look at who you need to bring in, what way you're going to play. Somebody now coming in, they're out of Europe, what they're playing for now is winning a league, I would assume. But whoever's coming in now is, unless Gary takes it to the end of the season, which is challenging enough, I would suspect, for him to be dropped back in as he was last year. So whoever comes in is immediately handicapped, because everything Larne would have planned for this season would have been to have a run in Europe and win the league. And now for somebody coming in, first look at the players, don't know the players, have to see them up close and personal in training and to get an idea. It's going to become very difficult. You're thinking about Larne winning the league this year. I think that move immediately says that that's going to be a real challenge for them. That would have, I would assume, have been the on the agenda to win the league this year. But if they appoint somebody, when are they going to do it? Is it going to happen in the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? You're arguing at the minute now to say their ambitions to win a league are immediately now moved back 2 steps.
Thanks, Chris. Mark, I want to bring you in and we'll give a bit of context as for maybe people who don't know. Kenny Bruce bought the club, 2017 I think it was. In recent years he sold shares to Night Train Vic, Scott Craze, American investors, and latterly now Kenny then sold his shares to Eric Perez and Nick Giannotti, who's involved with Plymouth Argyle, and I'm led to believe he's the hands-on man, Nick. Context this as well, Nathan Rooney, he was Kenny's man. I think the timing of his departure a few days after exiting Europe is very, very significant. I think my understanding is maybe things came to head on Monday afternoon. Maybe it was an issue about a player coming in or going somewhere else. Disagreement, basically. And we move forward now. But where does it, taking on from where Chris put us, like where does that put Larne now? My understanding at this stage, I don't know what you're hearing, there's nobody set, it sort of happened too quickly. There's nobody, they're not saying, right, we're going to take this guy. They haven't decided whether to go local or go, UK wide. But it's certainly not good, as Chris says. Too much upheaval at Larne in recent times.
Yeah, and look, the whole appointment of Nathan Rooney and his time in charge has been a shamble from start to finish. When he came in, there was a lot of talk about him. He'd done very well in Gibraltar and got a couple of good results in Europe. And then the whole fiasco of him not having his pro licence, and it was poorly handled by Larne. I don't think Nathan covered himself in glory. And then for Gary Havern to come in and then go out again and Nathan to come back in, the whole thing didn't look good from start to finish. So I can't say I was surprised when I heard that Nathan had gone, but I was surprised at the timing. For everything Chris has just said, the summer's the time to do that. And look, yes, the takeover did take a while, but everyone knew that was on the cards. When the people that mattered knew that was on the cards. So, if they were hell-bent on getting their own man, then that should have been in place earlier. Like, my information certainly is that they will cast the net. But to me, it has to be someone who knows the league. Again, for all the reasons Chris has said. They haven't had that pre-season. They need to get to know the players, because by the time that happens, they're probably already out of the title race. And that's what it has to be this season for Larne. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they went for a name from England or Scotland or something, but to me, someone with league experience or who knows the league would be vital.
Well, in fairness, and just to be devil's advocate here, Nathan Rooney didn't know the league when he was appointed. He was Kenny Bruce's number one choice, and I tend to agree with you. I think it's an advantage to know the league, but I do think Nathan Rooney did well. His signings, Dan Bent looks like a cracker. Matt Ridley at the back looks very decent. Kobe Muir is going to come on. And I think he's had his hands tied in terms of being able to bring other players in. So it's not all necessarily about knowing the league, and I suppose, but I do take on board Chris's point that no matter who comes in, they're knocked back.
Going into any job, it takes you a little bit of time to find your feet, be it in football or outside. So I just think whoever comes in is immediately going to be handicapped, and your expectation of somebody coming in is that it's going to take them a little bit of time. Time in football is
when he wasn't the manager.
Yeah, he had
got that.
Probably 6 or 8 months standing on the side when he wasn't manager to understand what he needed to do, and they're probably now going back to that same point. Gary will try and steady the ship and be that person to go back into that same role he was filling last year. But somebody coming in now will have to allow him to sort of take control and have a look at things. But yeah, it just feels like it's chaotic, and the reality in football, if things are chaotic, results will not be good.
Well, okay, we'll actually talk about football now, because the first fixture of the weekend is Larne indeed against Portadown. Chris, in footballing terms, bear in mind, I've talked about the signings that were made that I think are decent over the summer for Larne, but they're missing Andy Ryan. his long-term injury. Kane Bolger's out as well. What have you made of Larne, both in Europe and domestically, is what we've seen so far, and Portadown as well? I mean, Portadown are, I think things haven't gone well for them either. Not a great start.
You separate the European from the domestic. Larne's European start, or their form in Europe, good, arguably through 2 rounds. I mean, to get a draw in the away game, on paper that looks half decent, albeit the tie was over. But they've started with 1 point from 2 games. Yes, tough start, Coleraine, tough game, and then obviously Cliftonville. You get to the point now, and it's early on to start talking, but games start to become must-win, because they don't beat Portadown. Suddenly it's, let's say they draw, it's 2 points from 9. It's not title-winning form, and you're suddenly, with everything else that's going on, it heaps pressure on the players in terms of getting results and performances. In isolation, a draw against Cliftonville isn't too bad away from home, but they're at that point now where Friday's game with Portadown arguably becomes must-win. Doesn't matter how you play, just have to win.
Funny, Chris, and we'll go on to it later on. There are 2 or 3 teams, who have made sluggish starts, and you're already at the stage of weekend saying this next game's a must-win. Michael, Larne and Portadown, who do you fancy and for why?
Yeah, as Chris obviously said, Larne were looking very good in Europe, got through 2 rounds. I think they were quite poor against Coleraine. Coleraine obviously signed really, really well, and they get the point at Solitude isn't the worst result in the world, and by all accounts they should have won the game. Portadown are sort of hit and miss at times. I know they beat Dungannon really well, even though Dungannon had a couple of settings off. So again, it's so early in the season, you're talking about must-win games and picking up points. I was even chatting with Fino as well about Bangor. He's seen the match against Crusaders as a 6-pointer as well last night. So it's against Portadown would be desperate to get points on the board early doors. You can get left away from the start of the season really, really early, and obviously Larne, they definitely have title ambitions. But with all the upheaval that's went on, if you lose the next couple of games, you're talking you could be 9, 12 points behind the likes of the Glentoran and Coleraine so early on the season. It's going to be hard to make up, and just with all this upheaval and bring the new manager in, or will Gary stay for the season, it's going to could be detriment to the season so early on.
Could be indeed. Thanks, Michael. We talked before about, we talked about Andy Ryan being missing and about goals. We talked about Paul O'Neill and the relative merits and whatever else, and it was remiss of me to bring up Tiernan O'Connor, because he scored a cracker, obviously, against Cliftonville, and he's a player that I like. Do they have enough of a goal threat, Larne? I'm talking about for the season as a whole, and again, Larne Portadown. Who do you think's going to win that, Mark?
Yeah, I think I said in the last show as well, I would have concerns about where their goals are coming from. Leroy Miller has to come back as well, and he's going to add something to them, you would think, but it's hard to know that. He's been out that long. Can he return to the way he was before? Only time will tell that. I think they definitely need more. You've been impressed with some of the signings. To me, the jury's still out. Bent in little flashes that I've seen has looked a good player, but he was sent off the other night as well, let's remember. It's only a couple of games in, and the ones maybe last season, again, I think we're, a bit hit and miss. As far as the game on Friday goes, it's going to be interesting to see if Gary Haven tries to change too much so soon, because that could play into Portadown's hands as well. But I think if you're looking at it just in terms of team sheets, you would expect that Larne could have enough, but I think Portadown will fancy this one. Okay, thanks, Mark. Moving around, then we go to Saturday. Chris will come to you now. I don't know, it's topsy-turvy. For me, I think the big game is probably at Seaview, where unbeaten Glentoran take on new-look Crusaders. McLean's are 3 from 3, great start. Crusaders have 1 win and 2. Fraser Bryden scored, a new signing from Scotland, scored a hat-trick against Bangor, coming from 1-0 down, and he also scored at the weekend. He looks good. Glens looks strong. How do you assess it, Chris?
It becomes a hard one to call. Crusaders' result against Bangor will give them a little bit of confidence. The Glens have had a good start, 3 wins, keeping clean sheets. So it's a difficult game to call. Crusaders generally, or Glentoran generally, don't perform overly well at Seaview. It's not a venue that they've picked up an awful lot of wins over the years, but they go in with a lot of confidence, obviously, and it's been a good start. But we've seen this from Glentoran how many times, where they start the season well and find a way for things to fall apart every season for the last number of years, there's been a moment where you think Glentoran are going to go on and win a league here, and then within 2 weeks, everything comes crashing down. I see Mark smiling there and laughing. Galtie's doing the same. So I don't know. There's still a little bit to understand where Crusaders are at. There's a lot of change there. There's a lot of players. The one thing for me that you see in the league now is that the influx of players coming from outside, that it's very difficult to know what they're actually like. There's, most clubs are recruiting from outside here now. Less players from here are getting opportunities. I don't know if I like that, to be honest, because there's a lot of good players here that are largely getting cast aside. So it's difficult to call. I don't really know. Fraser Bryden scores a hat-trick. That's impressive, and I've heard good reports about him. But there's a little bit there of the unknown, and it's hard to know, say, where Crusaders will be at in a few weeks.
Thanks, Chris. Michael, Chris is right. From a Crusaders point of view, Crusaders largely can't afford good Irish League players, good local players. Good local players are going, like the money that they're getting these days for an average decent player is more than you guys are maybe getting back. Do you know what I mean?
Just think, how does a young player ever become an experienced player? The only way to do it is by giving them games, and I think that teams are too quick to bypass their young players. Go and put faith. Somebody go and put faith in young players and put them in. Dungannon have reaped the reward of that for a number of years, where they've just given opportunities to young players, and it becomes attractive for the best young players then as an opportunity to play. Glenavon did it for a long time. Rather than just thinking, right, we need to go outside. Yeah, the Blues have been, and that's the biggest stage, that's the biggest club, and they're willing to do it. And yes, there's a little bit of, you don't know what you're getting, but I don't know you know what you're getting by bringing somebody in that's never played here. It doesn't always work. There's been good players who've come to this league for years and not been able to adjust to it for whatever reason. So I do wish we'd had a little bit more faith. And I go back to that point, how does a young player ever become experienced? Only by playing games. You're not going to become an established player unless you play. And eventually young players will drift away. They'll go and play at a lower level because they're not getting opportunities.
Thank you, Chris. Again, the backdrop for this, Crusaders have a Scottish armada up front.
Yeah.
They've got 4 Scottish players who, in my opinion, are very good. We've seen 3 of them. Elliot Dunlap on the left, small, diminutive winger, excellent, pacey. Adam Brooks up front with Fraser Bryden, one small, one big. Both got pace. Brooksy, pace on the deck. Fraser Bryden, big unit, 6'2", and on the right wing you've got Kieran McKechnie, who's been injured, and we'll see him later on in the season. I'm reasonably happy with Crusaders going forward. I think they're a wee bit vulnerable at the back, in the central defensive position. Obviously Jacob Blaney's out, Lewis Barb's out and has come back in. Tell us, Glentoran against Crusaders, and you watched Crusaders against Bangor during the week, Michael?
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. They're okay going forward, very quick and good, skillful players. But at the back, obviously the first game of the season, we conceded 4 against Carrick. But by all accounts on the radio, David Jeffrey was saying how brilliant they were the first half hour. Scored 3 goals, could have scored more. You thought we've got it cracked here, but obviously defensive frailties, conceded poor goals. And then obviously watched them against Bangor as well. No problems at all going forward. They scored 3 goals, but at the back a bit of concern. And it's going by bringing these. You're not just bringing 1 or 2 players from England or Scotland. I looked at their team sheet, especially the first game of the season, and there was 5 names. I just seen who are these boys here. So obviously last night, people were saying these boys. I was trying to look at their shirt numbers and who they were and how they were performing. But in general, the 4 players I had, the boys I didn't know, done very well. So it's credit to whoever's bringing them in. I'm not too sure how these players or how they get these players these days, as agents or scouts, or do they go and watch them or whatever. So it's the questions you're asking. You're bringing boys over from England and Scotland who obviously have a very impressive CV. But why are they coming over here to play football in Northern Ireland? Back in the day when me and Chris were playing, it was once in a blue moon a player from England or Scotland came over, and we had Kenny Irons and Paul Dalglish. We knew and Phil Charnock. We knew who those boys were, and they were brilliant. Kenny Irons and Charnock were very good. Paul Dalglish, Fitzroy Simpson. They were. Wow, Fitzroy played in the World Cup, but he came to the Irish League. It was like, I think he didn't lead the centre circle, so I was knackered doing all his run up and down for him. And Kenny was the same, but Kenny was outstanding. I love playing with Kenny Irons. So these players here, I think it's a big gamble. Do you, with Chris says,
Yeah, I
trust
think
a
there
young
is,
boy to go and
there is a
play?
gamble because it's largely agents that are working with clubs to put players in, and fine when, listen, we're a couple of games in and it's working. The time to judge it will be much later down the line. But I do, again, probably looking at it from being involved with younger players, I do wish we put more trust in younger players and give them the opportunity to play, rather than first instinct is to go and try and recruit from outside.
But there's clearly more money in the Irish League than there is in Scottish League One, isn't there?
Well, I was going
Absolutely.
to say there, Mark, when the boys,
But is there?
the pros here say, well, what are they coming to the Irish League for? And I was going to say, tongue in cheek, well, they all want to come to the Irish League to end up playing for Linfield, I'm talking about Kieran Offord, who was a cracking success and is now at Linfield this season. So it's a model that Crusaders are using. I'm not unhappy with it, and I'll be honest with you, I think Crusaders will be good going forward.
But you look at Crusaders have played, no disrespect, they've played Carrick and Bangor, who you expect to be bottom half of this. If they come up against a Coleraines, Linfields, Larne, or Windsor Park or Inver Park, whatever, I think it'll be a different ball game for these players.
See with your point there about Kieran Offord, I know St Mirren championed that move, that they had about the success of that move, a player that came through their youth academy and they then sold. And
for 100 grand?
Yeah, but I mean, St Mirren shouting from the rooftops about selling a player to the Irish League, I found to be astonishing.
Certainly. Well, again, as Mark said, there's been money in the Irish League. There's more money, and plus also the lure of playing in Europe now, the boys say, is very, very important. And because if they're playing in the Scottish Championship, they obviously don't have a chance.
Yeah, they're never getting there.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to get bogged down in Crusaders too much because we've got to talk about the Glens as well. What do you think of them, Mark? Again, Chris is right. We've heard this trumpeting. We're back, and and there's a long way to go. But listen, you've got to be Jordan Stewart sparkling. They're playing well. Everything seems to be harmonious in the East.
Yeah, and look, it happened a while ago under Deggy as well that everyone seemed to be singing off the same hymn sheet, and that's the way it looks at the moment. But they haven't played any of the so-called bigger rivals yet. That's not their fault. They can only beat what's in front of them. Am I right in saying they haven't conceded a goal as well? Listen, they've done fantastically well to start the season. You couldn't ask for more. And personally, I'm delighted to see Jordan Stewart start the way he has. It was always going to be difficult for Succa going back to Glentoran. If he didn't start well, you'd wonder if the crowd were going to get on his back. But he has started well. But unfortunately, when it comes to Glentoran, and I don't think it's any slight on Deggy Devine and his backroom staff, I just think they get too overexcited. Maybe the people behind the scenes up the stairs get a little bit overexcited when things are going well and maybe take their eye off the ball somewhere, and that's normally where it all goes belly up for them. Look, hopefully it doesn't happen because, I would love to see Glentoran up there challenging. It would make for a much more exciting league. But I think it's a little while away yet.
Okay, thanks for that. Elsewhere, Chris, Glenavon against Coleraine. The Bandsiders are also unbeaten, 7 points from 9. Glenavon are struggling in my book already with 3 defeats. And also Dungannon Swifts also made a poor start. The Irish Cup holders, 3 defeats, and they take on Carrick at Stanmore. Carrick are very strong physically and strong on the pitch with 2 from 2. Those 2 games, I'm worried about Glenavon, and I'm surprisingly worried about Dungannon Swifts.
Yeah, both games are clashes of 2 good starts versus 2 bad starts. The bookies are going to be saying back in Coleraine and back in Carrick. I think Dungannon will be all right. I do. I think maybe a little bit of a hangover from Europe where they had some success but didn't obviously get through. I think they'll be fine. Carrick, as you rightly say, big, strong, physical team. Stephen knows the league, signs experience. I think they'll be better than they were last season, albeit probably coming from a low bar there. Glenavon's a funny one because I felt they would have kicked on a little bit. Paddy's been in a while now and good experience around the league. Again, good coach, knows the game, but they've had a poor start and they're up against Coleraine, who everybody's expecting they're going to be right in there challenging for the league. They have to be based on budget alone. If anything other than a real good title charge will be probably a failure for Coleraine.
Thanks, Chris. Michael, I saw Carrick beat Glenavon last Saturday, and they offered little going forward, and they look like they're lacking a bit of nous, a wee bit of naivety. Maybe need a bit more experience. They've lost players, and in fairness, I think they've not struggling, but they've tried to get players in and been outbid, or the players have gone elsewhere. Rhys Campbell's an obvious example. So Glenavon, Coleraine, a great start, and the Swifts against Carrick. And I must say, now I haven't seen Carrick twice. I'm not going to say that they're just big and strong, and that's cliche, and it's to do Stephen Baxter and his players a disservice. Jimmy Callagher strolled it at the back, but there's a lot to like about them. They're a good team unit there.
Yeah, they've signed really experienced players, some good young players as well. I think it's Aidan Steele, and obviously Matthew Snoddy's not young, but he's still got plenty of energy from Glenavon, so they signed well. But it comes down to budgets and how much money these teams have, and a team like Glenavon are a great club for a long, long time, and I just feel like they're being left behind with all these investments. Like, I would put Glenavon and Coleraine sort of similar sort of types of clubs. There's Coleraine all of a sudden now signing Joel Coopers from Linfield, and we hear all the reports about all these other players and how much money they're getting. A club like Glenavon are just being left behind, and such a great club, and the gaps between the budgets and where they're going to come in the league tables is going to be evident come the end of the season. And again, they're going to have to come and find some masterstrokes and get players from somewhere. And players from England and Scotland are not coming over for a couple £100 anymore. It's substantial amounts of money, and budgets are stretched. And Glenavon have a great youth setup as well, and it's all been well said about promoting the youth players up to the first team. But obviously, I take a 20s team now, and the levels is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because of these. Chris said at the start of the show, there's boys coming from England, Scotland, whenever, and it's a big risk to put the young boys in and might not be ready enough, and where do they go from there? So again, it's going to come down to the last couple of weeks of the transfer window for Glenavon to maybe try and get a bit of experience in, getting players up front to score goals, but that's been awfully hard to come by. Even the top clubs like Larne and Linfield struggle to get, obviously Kieran Offord's flying now at the minute, but it's to get a player to come and score 20-30 goals a season, it's easier said than done these days, and sort of feel sorry for the Glenavon. I think it's going to be a long, hard season for them, but it's down to them. Paddy McLaughlin's a great manager, been in around the league, great coach. He's got Colin coach in helping them as well, so they've got the work cut out for them, and it's going to be a very difficult and tough season for them.
Thanks, Michael. I think that's what Glenavon have gone from. Personally, Paddy McLaughlin, I've great faith in him as a manager. Your views both on the two games that we're talking about here, Glenavon, Coleraine, Bandsiders we've talked about, and the Swifts against Carrick.
Look, I have to say, I was slightly concerned about Carrick and the signings. You can say, yes, it's a lot of experience and that's vital, but that also comes with its risks as well, and I just thought that could have been a bigger risk than it was worth. But you have to say fair play to Stephen Baxter and the staff, what they've done, the players. It's been a brilliant start to the season. And I think, just the momentum that first game could have given them, they were dead and buried. And to come back for that was incredible. And look, I always thought there'd be a hangover for Dungannon. I think I said in the last show I didn't think they'd finish in the top 6 this year. And I stand by that. I think there was always going to be a bit of a come down because it was such an overachievement last year. And then when you add into that, they've lost the likes of John McGovern as well. Doesn't help. In terms of the other game, look, Glenavon have had a poor start. There's no getting away from that. By all accounts, they were slightly better at Glentoran in midweek, but I just don't know where they're going to score goals from. That's the main problem. You have to look at it as Coleraine. Coleraine have all the firepower. They're scoring goals from different people as well. I think it could be a very routine victory for Coleraine.
Thanks, Mark. And the last one on Saturday, Ballymena United against Bangor, the newcomers under Lee Feeney. Jim Irvin going well, 2 from 2. I'm glad for him, I must say. Bangor 1 win and 2 defeats, started brilliantly, and now maybe real life has kicked in.
Yeah, it was a brilliant start for Lee Feeney, and sometimes that happens at the start of the season as well. All the sort of euphoria around it and the atmosphere, big crowd, and they get the result. I have to say one thing, yes, they lost to Crusaders, and by all accounts, Crusaders were the better side, but I saw there were so many red cards in the game, and the one that I have to bring up is the one for Matthew Ferguson. He's likely to get 6 games for what's probably seen as a headbutt or an attempted headbutt. I think the TV evidence shows it certainly wasn't that. It seemed very harsh to me. I just, for a player who's trying to get back into the side, he had his own issues last season. He's trying to get back in the side this season, and to be out for 6 games for that, I think would be an absolute disgrace. I hope the IFA look at it. Do I have any faith that they will look at that and come back the way it should do? Probably not.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Michael, you were at the game the other night as well, and I'm a wee bit perturbed because we have seen a number of red cards already. We're only a couple of 2 or 3 games in. So Ballymena United and Bangor.
Yeah, last season Ballymena would be a bit disappointed by where they came in the league, and certainly no real cup runs. So I think obviously James went out and signed well. But with that there comes big expectations. So I think for Ballymena to come the bottom half of the season would be seen as a disappointment. So no, they'll be pushing to finish as high up the league as possible. In terms of Bangor, I've watched them there against Crusaders. Well, they did pretty well, huffed and puffed the second half, and it was 2-1 down. They missed 2 penalties. You miss 2 penalties in a game and you should be getting something from it. They huffed and puffed and missed a few chances, and then obviously, as Mark alluded to, the red cards that came into play there, and especially Matthews was very, very harsh. And I don't want to come here and bash referees. It's a very, very difficult job. And when I was playing, I was the world's worst with referees. And
you were the best referee.
Well, I didn't want to say it now, but thanks very much. Mr. Krangle still tells me. I'm definitely better than Raymond anyway. But I obviously take the 20s, as I say before, and Tony Clark and Jimmy Ramsden come down to referee our games, and you get to speak to them on a normal level. And 2 great lads, and they do our games very well. But not these 2 guys in particular, but just like the standard across is maybe not what it should be. So obviously all the investment in the league and these great players, and players come from England and Scotland, and everyone's trying to improve everything. You need to look at referees as well, and not just hanging them out to dry, but obviously how are you going to improve the referees and how are you going to help them. And I was standing watching it last night, and obviously I'm very good friends with Lee Finney. I was standing there in my Linfield tracksuit and I was sort of going whatever the Bangor. I was getting a bit frustrated with the linesman and the referees, and not that he was poor just against Bangor. I thought it was just he sort of didn't really help the game flow. It was sort of for both sides. It was sort of like
comes from the top down, in my opinion.
I think the red card is what's the player doing that is saying that he's been headbutted?
Going down easy.
Yeah, he's not touched and he's lying down as if he's the one that's making it out that he's been headbutted. That's the referee's reacted to that. You know, I think I have some sympathy with the referee in that. I mean, because
the referee has to react to what he sees, not what he thinks he sees.
Yeah, but by the same token, if in that instance, if you see a player going down and you see that Matthews going forward, as he has done, he's led by the head, but he certainly didn't headbutt him. But the player then goes down as if, you know, he's you know, so it's hard to separate that. He's got a split second to make a decision. Possibly in his report is where it'll come out in terms of how he treats that there, or how it's viewed afterwards. Because I know I wouldn't be a fan of bringing VAR into the Irish League, but by the same token, in this instance where a player can use this to show that he hasn't actually headbutted a player, or it's treated slightly differently in terms of what comes next as a punishment, should he get 6 games for that? Absolutely not. The referee's been conned by the player's reaction to it. If that player doesn't react the way he has reacted, Matthew Ferguson's not red carded, and he's certainly not doing 6 games.
It's an awful job being a referee. I'm sure I wouldn't do it for loving their money, but we can all understand it. They're human beings. They're going to get decisions wrong, but they're getting so many big decisions wrong, and that's where it comes.
That there's Matthew Ferguson could lose 6 games and come to January transfer window out the door, and I go back to buy Portadown. I want to still talk about it as well. Like Portadown lost out in European football money because of his refereeing decisions. But what happens to referees? Maybe just go into the championship or go somewhere else for a week or 2, and then managers lose jobs, players lose contracts.
Unfortunately, I think we'll be talking about referees more this season. Coming to the last fixture of the weekend, Chris, Linfield against Cliftonville. Always a very colourful fixture for me over the years. The Blues are in between playing Shelbourne in the Europa Conference League. Do you think that'll affect their domestic game? I suspect not. I think David Healy's learned now. He's got the experience now to know he'll not take his eye off the ball, I don't think, against Cliftonville.
No, I mean, he'll certainly go in not wanting to take his eye off it, but I think it's going to become an increasing problem for Irish League clubs juggling Europe and domestic fixtures. We all seen it with Larne last season as they, you know, had the actual group stages. But I mean, and it's been an ongoing thing in the English Premier League where they talk about Thursday night, Sunday, and clubs always struggle when they play Sunday after a Thursday night, and it almost then becomes psychological for teams that, you know, Thursday and the Sunday we're going to struggle here Sunday because we played Thursday. And it has become something that's really apparent, and I think then it adds to the pressure that are on teams to try and manage and juggle those fixtures. But I think there's an inevitability that, you know, Thursday, those European games are huge. They become almost like cup finals for our teams because there's a real want to do well and progress in Europe. We talk about everything that comes with it. It projects our league in the best possible way, that, you know, from a PR point of view, that if we can get another team, it would be brilliant if Linfield can make the group stages, because it puts more eyes on our league. It brings more money to it as well. So that comes with a lot of pressure, but then they've got to play 3 days later in a league game. So I think it's fairly natural that levels will drop ever so slightly, because it's not like they just have to play Thursday then Sunday. They play Sunday, but there's also eyes on the next Thursday. And, you know, let's say they win the game on Thursday night and the following Thursday becomes huge. How do you deal with Sunday? You can't just turn off. You know, you can't say, right, we're gonna leave everybody out, or we're gonna, you know, it becomes difficult. So I think there's, you know, they'll absolutely not go in with the intention of taking their eye off the ball, but it's human nature.
You seen that last Sunday against Dungannon?
Yeah.
I was expecting not the worst, whatever. I just knew the big, massive European ties in between, but they were brilliant on the Sunday against Dungannon, Kieran Offord especially. And we've seen last year, as Chris said about Larne, it's very, very difficult. So Linfield, obviously, the Linfield way, even they get through in Europe, the group stages, they still need to win the league, and the supporters expect that.
If I can just, a couple of points before I bring you in, Mark, and be interested here. I agreed last year. I thought that Larne's participation in Europe blew them off course to a degree. Now, just for debating purposes, number one, Linfield are only travelling to Shelburne. I think it was the travel, a lot of the, you know, that interrupted thing. So I think that definitely goes in Linfield's favour. Funny, I interviewed Kirk Miller before the season, and I asked him about this. Will Linfield do well, like Larne? You know, will they be hampered in their domestic aspirations? And he said, I think that's an excuse. I think we can cope all right. And you know, I don't know. So a lot to think of. Linfield, Cliftonville in between the two Shells games, Michael. And I think Linfield are starting to. I think Linfield have a great chance against Shelburne, to be honest. I fancy them over 2 legs because they're sharper and they've got Kieran Offord playing in the right position and firing.
If an extra 4 or 5 weeks preparation, no doubt about it. Shelburne were really, really good against Linfield, and Linfield were not their best. Like, they were just back in 3-4 weeks, whatever it was. So now they've got an extra 4 European games, the match against Dungannon, a few friendly. So they'll be up to speed. I think they'll give a better account of themselves. I thought Shelburne were really, really good against Linfield, so Linfield, they've be at that level again.
But this is where we want our teams to be. We want to be going into these games being prepared, not coming in and being, we've had 2 pre-season games and we've had 3 or 4 weeks of training. You want to be able to deliver your best. And this is a problem we have in terms of European football and our calendar. So and I know this is a bigger debate here, but we're now talking about Linfield having a proper chance rather than before. They were going at what percentage were they at their best? It certainly wasn't 100%. So they're now an awful lot closer because they've had games, they've had tough opposition, and they're ready to go.
What about the Reds?
Well, you know the approach they're going to take. They're going to relish it because it's the game that it is, but also they'll play on the fact that Linfield have played Thursday night. They'll try to use that to their advantage. Still a good team, full of good players. Probably a start that, you know, losing the cup final last year will have been a huge disappointment for them. And it's how they reacted, you know, for this season. What's their aspirations? I assume to be pushing for Europe through the league and maybe win a cup again. I don't think they have a big enough or strong enough squad to win a league, but they're full of really good players and they always play a really good style of football too.
The Reds also have this takeover proposal which is dragging on longer than maybe they had anticipated. What do you like about Cliftonville? They've certainly improved from the start of from the first game.
Yeah, well, they've got one of the best managers about in Jim Magilton. I think he's fantastic. He's a breath of fresh air. Last couple of years he's been outstanding. Losing players and bringing players in. I wouldn't say a complete rebuild every single season, but he has plenty of work to do. And again, go back to the old thing I'm saying about those investments, and they're in competition with Linfields and Larnes and Coleraine to get players in, and if they're getting extra money to go to a different club, then usually players tend to do so. So it's a very difficult job to do. But again, they still always produce. Rory Hale's still flying and brilliant. They're good style of football.
They do throw young players in too. I'm talking about that, and I've apologise because I forgot about Cliftonville. They've taken that approach and they've thrown young players in and they've kicked on career-wise. So that's probably been an approach they've had to take based on.
Needs must,
correct, but it shows you when you put young players in. You know they deliver. Not all the time, but there's no guarantee for an experienced player. There's no guarantees of any player.
Way, but
correct.
You're investing in your own future with younger players.
Well, that's football. Every signing's a gamble. Every young player.
There's no guarantees with anybody.
How do you find out, as you said at the very head of the show, Linfield, Cliftonville, Mark, a very attractive fixture. You know both clubs well. I think it's going to pan out, and why?
Yeah, look, with Linfield being in Europe, to me, Chris mentioned it's like cup finals, European games, and I agree with that. But I think this game being sandwiched in between the two Shelbourne games, I think that second leg of Shelbourne, if the Blues are still in the tie, it's bigger than a cup final. The money that's involved, the prestige that's involved, everything that goes with it, I think it's even bigger than an Irish Cup final. And David Healy probably won't look at it that way at all. He looks at the glory of doing things, not what the money it makes and things like that. So I think that will be on their minds. I think it's only human nature that has to be a part of it. Whether or not they'll still be in the tie, look, I agree with some of the lads as well that, Shelbourne were a good side. I don't think Shelbourne were at their best against Linfield. I think they have more to give, whereas Linfield will definitely be better. I think Shells will be better as well. I certainly wouldn't make Linfield favourites for it. It'd be great to see, but it's going to be tough. And like I said, I think the Cliftonville game's going to be tough for that reason, just sandwiched in between. And as the lad said, Jim Magilton will certainly play on that, and why shouldn't he? It's going to be difficult for them though. Jim and Skin Little have worked wonders since they've gone in there, signing strikers every summer it seems to replace the ones that have left. And I feel for him, because now Reece Campbell came in, someone I was looking forward to seeing. I thought he was a perfect fit for Cliftonville. Now he's injured his knee with an ACL and he's out for the season. So, it's always going to be tough for them because I don't see lots and lots of goals in their team. But with Joe Gormley there, he does what he does. Again, his goal in midweek was just instinct. It was a brilliant strike. So with Joe Gormley up front, could I see Cliftonville win at Windsor? Absolutely.
Very good. Okay, gentlemen, we're only 2-3 games in, full of intrigue, shocks, surprises, plenty to talk about. Mark, it's been a pleasure. Michael, thank you. Chris, as always, great to have you on board. That's it for now. We'll see you the next time on Football Express.